The hero of our story suffered greatly from bullying because of his injured leg, even to the point of losing his job. While he didn't know what someone like him could do in this world, a disaster occurred that changed everything, giving him a new opportunity to reach the top and prove himself to everyone. Our story begins with a young man named Yoon-ho, who received the news of his dismissal from the company due to the economic circumstances of that period. The team leader, feeling nervous about breaking the news, gathered his thoughts and conveyed with deep regret what had happened. He explained that he wished Yoon-ho could continue working with them, knowing how diligent Yoon-ho had been over the past 2 years. Yoon-ho replied that he understood the situation and would start packing his belongings in preparation to leave. His thoughts drifted back to 2 years ago when he began working at the company on a 2-year temporary contract. During that time, he had to prove himself in any way possible to secure a permanent position. Yoon-ho gave his all, completing every task, no matter how challenging, just to achieve that goal. However, despite all his efforts over the 2 years, he was unable to secure a permanent position. The scene returned to the present, where the team leader told Yoon-ho not to consider it a true dismissal, but rather what the company now called a restructuring. He emphasized that it was a company decision and asked Yoon-ho not to take it personally. Yoon-ho responded that he wouldn't take it personally and assured him that he held no negative feelings toward him. After that, Yoon-ho silently counted to 3. As expected, the team leader's expression shifted from sadness to a smile, saying he admired Yoon-ho's strength and ability to remain unaffected by such matters. Yoon-ho thought to himself that he had anticipated this reaction. Noticing their awkwardness during his dismissal, he attributed it to their typical behavior. The team leader continued, smiling, saying that Yoon-ho would succeed wherever he went despite his leg injury. He noted that Yoon-ho was still young, full of energy, and had worked diligently over the past period. He then suggested they go out for lunch to lift Yoon-ho's spirits and invited all the employees to join. However, one of the employees commented that Yoon-ho might not be able to go because of his injured leg. Yoon-ho looked down sadly and told the team leader that he wouldn't be able to go as the restaurant was too far. He stood up and asked them to go without him, saying he would eat alone. When asked if he was sure, Yoon-ho confirmed, saying he had an appointment with someone, and then left. Yoon-ho went to the rooftop restaurant of the building and sat alone to eat, as he didn't have any actual appointment. He had said that to avoid burdening the employees further. He looked up at the sky thoughtfully, saying he would miss this place. Yoon-ho recalled when he was once the most promising athlete in South Korea. Unfortunately, he couldn't maintain that status for long due to a minor car accident before a practical exam, which left him disabled. Yoon-ho expressed that all he wanted now was to run once more, to the point where his heart felt like it would burst, but he said such a thing was impossible unless he were born anew. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by a voice asking what he had been thinking about so deeply. Turning around, Yoon-ho asked the speaker if she had been there long, but she replied that she had just arrived. The girl was Ho Ji-yoon, a temporary employee who had started working at the company a week after Yoon-ho as a secretary. Ji-yoon asked Yoon-ho what he had been pondering so deeply. He replied that he was thinking about the new place he would work at. Ji-yoon joked, saying there was no need to think about such things, and assuring him he wasn't about to be dismissed from the company. She was shocked when Yoon-ho told her she was right, and that he had in fact been dismissed that very day. Ji-yoon immediately apologized, saying she hadn't known what had happened. Yoon-ho reassured her that she bore no responsibility, and that it wasn't her fault at all. Ji-yoon asks Yoon-ho when he plans to leave his job in the company. He replies that he's still unsure, expecting the company to contact him soon with the details. Suddenly, both hear a voice echoing in their minds, announcing a new notification. Ji-yoon, confused, remarks that the voice seems to resonate inside her head, rather than being a typical company announcement. The voice repeats, stating that a mission will begin shortly. Yoon-ho asks Ji-yoon if she can hear it too, and she confirms she does. Yoon-ho and Ji-yoon are not the only ones who hear the voice. Everyone present in the area can hear it. Another message arrives, informing everyone that the planet has been sold and will be restructured. However, no one seems to pay much attention to this message. Yoon-ho comments that it's nonsensical gibberish. At that moment, a man calls out to Ji-yoon. Yoon-ho recognizes him as Director Choi, the executive from Ji-yoon's department, accompanied by one of her colleagues. Upon arriving, Choi asks Ji-yoon why she is still sitting there when the lunch break is nearly over. Once again, the voice announces that the mission is about to start. Choi scolds Ji-yoon, expressing his disbelief that she is still affected by what he describes as nonsense. He continues berating her, saying that with her current work approach, she'll never become a permanent employee. He urges her to hurry up so she won't be late. Yoon-ho intervenes, assuring Choi that there's no need to worry, pointing out that there's still about 15 minutes left of the lunch break, and that they won't be late even if they sit a little longer. Choi then asks if Yoon-ho is the new trainee from the adjacent department, and rudely inquires if he's the one with the leg injury. Ji-yoon tries to stop him, but Choi continues, adding that he heard Yoon-ho was dismissed, as expected. He remarks that with a flaw like his, Yoon-ho should live more seriously than others. At that moment, Everyone hears a new notification announcing that the first mission is about to begin. It instructs everyone to enter the green zone that has appeared before them within the allotted time, warning that those who fail to comply will be restructured. A countdown begins. Choi comments that he doesn't fully understand what's happening, but he finds it intriguing. His companion remarks that this seems like an event organized by the company's gaming division. Choi agrees, commenting on how strange modern technology is, before leaving with his colleague. Yunho feels that there is something suspicious about this event. He notices Choi and his colleague mocking him, imitating the way he walks. Choi sarcastically suggests Yunho visit an orthopedic doctor for his leg, while the other jokingly adds that he should try physical therapy too. Yunho remains unaffected by the mockery, and Ji-Yun, noticing this, immediately apologizes to him, saying it happened because of her. Yunho reassures her that he's used to such things, but she insists that it's not something anyone should get used to. As they approach the green zone, Ji-Yun asks what they should do next. Yunho replies that they've reached the area, and there's no harm in entering to see what happens. Ji-Yun agrees, and the two move toward the green zone. She marvels at the zone's design quality, wondering if it's just a hologram. Yunho responds that he doesn't know, as such things are beyond his understanding. Ji-Yun then asks Yunho what he plans to do if he decides to leave his job. He replies that it's a good question, and that he will most likely start looking for a new job. Meanwhile, Director Choi and his companion are at the door, but when they try to open it, the door doesn't respond, angering Choi, who questions how such a thing could happen. The countdown ends just as Yunho and Ji-Yun step into the safe zone. Suddenly, Yunho feels a strange sensation, prompting Ji-Yun to ask if he's okay. When they look back, they notice bizarre things happening to the people outside. A notification then appears, announcing that the time for the mission has ended and that workforce restructuring will now begin. Choi and his companion's bodies begin to disintegrate. Ji-Yun is in disbelief at what she's seeing, and Yunho explains to her that everyone who was outside the safe zone had their bodies disintegrate and vanish. Afterward, a properties window appears before Yunho, asking him to select a reward for successfully completing the mission. Yunho is shocked by what he sees and reviews the information, finding that his health and physical strength are fully restored, except for the issue with his leg. He wonders if he can use the reward to address it. When he presses on the representation of his leg in the window, a glow surrounds it, and he receives a notification that the reward distribution is beginning. Yunho is surprised when his leg improves by only 20%. Ji-Yun approaches him and asks if he also sees the properties window. He confirms and feels relieved to know he isn't the only one experiencing this. Ji-Yun then asks if he has any idea what's happening. He responds that he isn't sure, but since the notification mentioned this being the first mission, it's likely there are more to come, and if they fail, they'll disappear like the others. Ji-Yun grows anxious and wonders who could be behind something like this. Yunho replies that he has no idea, but the only certainty is that a new message will arrive soon. As Yunho predicted, they receive a message informing them that the safe zone will change randomly after the next mission begins, giving them 5 minutes to prepare. Ji-Yun becomes increasingly tense and asks Yunho what they should do next. He tells her they must move quickly because the second mission will undoubtedly be more difficult. When she asks why he believes that, he explains that the notifications were clear about restructuring, implying that they want to retain only the most valuable individuals. If his theory is correct, the competition will be more intense than in the first mission, and it's likely that fights will break out among the participants. He adds nervously that these battles are inevitable, especially since everyone witnessed others being erased after failing. If that's not enough to cause conflict, people will fight for the mission rewards. Yunho then tests his leg and feels that it's much lighter, despite only a 20% improvement, and notices a clear change in his walking. He calls Ji-Yun and tells her they need to move now, thinking to himself that this is his chance to change his fate in this absurd restructuring. He tells her the first thing they need to do is search for anything that can be used as a weapon, vowing to do whatever it takes to survive. Ji-Yun remains tense, saying she doesn't know what they could find in the office that would work as a weapon, and asks Yunho if he has any ideas. Yunho reflects silently, admitting it will be very difficult to find something suitable for a weapon in a typical office. He then replies that he can't think of anything specific right now, and advises her to grab anything that might prove useful as a weapon on their way. Ji-Yun is surprised by Yunho's suggestion, and asks if she also needs to carry a weapon. He confirms, emphasizing that she must have a weapon to protect herself. He then adds that they will stay on the rooftop for the next 5 minutes, and if no safe zone appears there, they will immediately descend via the stairs. Ji-Yun is puzzled by Yunho's mention of using the stairs and suggests that the elevator would be better, but he explains that the stairs are safer because they might encounter problems if the elevator gets overcrowded or someone tries to disable it. Ji-Yun, still visibly worried, asks if Yunho will be able to manage the stairs in his condition. Yunho thinks to himself about how slow and painful his steps are, with every movement causing him significant discomfort. However, he is certain that if he can fully recover his injured leg, the situation will greatly improve. He then reassures Ji-Yun, saying that he'll be fine and will push through even if it feels like his leg might tear apart, determined to give his best effort until the end. At that moment, a notification announces the start of the mission, displaying a map showing the locations of the safe zones and giving them a time limit of 10 minutes. When Yunho and Ji-Yun see the map, they comment on how well distributed the safe zones are and decide to head to the nearest one. They begin descending the stairs, with Yunho visibly struggling due to his injured leg. Ji-Yun suggests they take a short break since they still have time, but Yunho insists he's fine and there's no need to rest. Yunho reflects inwardly, acknowledging that the situation is challenging but not comparable to the intense training he underwent before his injury. He feels elated to be able to sense his toes again, and hopes the next reward will further improve his leg, perhaps even fully healing it. Ji-Yun informs him that they've reached the 19th floor. However, when they enter the area, they find it empty and wonder why. Moments later, people begin rushing into the safe zone. Of course, not everyone enters calmly. Fights break out as some try to take others' spots. Observing this, Ji-Yun realizes their predictions were correct, commenting on how everyone is fighting as they expected. Yunho replies that he had anticipated a much worse situation. Ji-Yun expresses concern that they might not find a spot, but Yunho reassures her that the safe zone can accommodate 100 people, while there are currently only about 50. Ji-Yun is astonished and asks how Yunho knows the safe zone's capacity. He explains that he calculated it based on his steps. Ji-Yun doesn't understand his reasoning, so Yunho clarifies that his stride is about 30 centimeters, and a single person can stand within that space. He adds that the safe zone is 16 meters long and 7 meters wide, and multiplying those dimensions gives 112, which is the approximate number of people who can fit inside. Ji-Yun is amazed by Yunho's explanation, and asks if he always calculates his steps like that. He replies that it's a habit of his, noting that when he was a runner, he used to measure distances, and this habit became more pronounced after his accident. Ji-Yun remarks that what he does is incredible, almost like he has superpowers. Yunho, however, urges her to focus, saying they need to enter now as time is running out. He warns her to stay alert since they don't know what the people left outside might do. When they entered the safe zone, the area was extremely crowded. Ji-Yun commented that it was fortunate they managed to get in quickly. Yunho advised her to stay cautious, and she assured him she would never let her guard down. Suddenly they heard a voice from outside pleading for them to delay the door's closure and let him in. Ji-Yun recognized the person immediately. It was her team leader. He noticed her and called out for her to come to him. Ji-Yun tried to reach him to help him get inside, but Yunho stopped her, warning her not to act recklessly, as her attempt could cause others to push her out as well. The countdown timer appeared, with only 5 seconds remaining. The team leader shouted desperately for Ji-Yun to reach him before the time ran out. Ji-Yun rushed toward him, pushing through the crowd to reach him. When she finally grabbed his hand, the timer hit 0, but half of his body was still outside the safe zone. Ji-Yun tried to pull him in before the timer expired. She yanked him hard, causing them both to fall to the ground. She laughed nervously, remarking that she hadn't expected him to be so light and expressing relief that he had made it into the safe zone. However, when she opened her eyes, she saw that only half of his body was inside the safe zone. Shocked, she began screaming loudly. Yunho quickly ran to her, pushing through the crowd to reach her. When he arrived, he tried to calm her down, but she was inconsolable, blaming herself and saying that if she had pulled him faster, this wouldn't have happened. Yunho felt a deep sense of unease when a notification appeared showing the number of deaths, which had exceeded 1,000, leaving only about 700 survivors. He returned to Ji-Yun and asked if she could hear him, telling her he understood how overwhelming the situation was, but emphasizing that this wasn't the time to mourn, as the next mission would begin soon. He urged her to claim her reward and prepare for the next challenge, but she remained unresponsive. When Yunho realized there was no way to snap her out of her state, he came up with a bold idea. He decided to use his current challenge reward to enhance her mental abilities, though he wasn't sure if it would work. He opened his properties window and experimented with using the reward in this way. The attempt succeeded, and after canceling the enhancement, he ran back to Ji-Yun. He asked if she could hear him and told her he had a request for her. He instructed her to open her properties window and use her reward to enhance her mental abilities. When Ji-Yun followed his instructions, a glow surrounded her. Yunho worried that his plan might have failed and wondered what would happen next. Shortly after, Ji-Yun stood up, appearing much calmer than before. She told Yunho she would quickly change her torn clothes and return. She left, and Yunho remarked that this system was truly magical, as it was unnatural for her mood to change so drastically in such a short time. Reflecting on the situation, Yunho noted that he had received 2 rewards so far, and felt the need to gather more information to determine his next steps. He opened his properties window and asked the system if it was possible to gain immunity from elimination in future missions, but the option wasn't available. He then asked if he could receive a gun or any other weapon as a reward, but this was also not possible. Yoonho smiled and told the system that he wasn't upset about all his requests being denied, and that he had become extremely patient due to the life he lived with his injured leg. After that, he asked the system if he could acquire the skill of foresight or the ability to fly, but the system replied that this was not available at this stage. Yoonho was greatly surprised, as the system's words implied that it was indeed possible, just not at the moment. He then settled for the information he had learned so far and stated that whoever was responsible for these elimination tasks definitely had no intention of stopping them so easily. Afterward, he chose to heal his leg again, but this time, the healing reached 70%. In this condition, he could walk, though he couldn't run quickly. At that moment, Ji-Yun returned and found Yoonho stepping on his leg naturally. She asked him if he had used his reward to heal it. He replied that it wasn't fully healed, and that he would soon be able to treat it completely. They then received a notification that the new task was about to begin. Yoonho commented that these people didn't even give them enough time to talk. Ji-Yun looked for the nearest safe zone they could reach, which was on the 15th floor below them. Yoonho told her they needed to move quickly, as most people might have already arrived there. Ji-Yun glanced at Yoonho hesitantly, as if carefully choosing her words, and spoke in a calm tone, saying she wanted to ask him something. Yoonho, focused on the path ahead as they descended together, replied in a neutral tone that she could ask as long as they kept walking. She then told him that when the team leader's body was split in half earlier, he hadn't been surprised at all, while most people, including her, would have been terrified. She then casually asked how he had remained so calm. Yoonho thought for a moment, and then told her that, in hindsight, her perception of his reaction as strange was entirely natural. He explained that it was due to courage training he had undergone as an athlete in track and field. Continuing in a calm tone, he added that the bigger reason was that he had witnessed his parents' death in a car accident when he was a child. Ji-Yun lowered her gaze and, with a voice full of regret, apologized, saying she shouldn't have asked such a thing. Yoonho shook his head calmly and replied briefly that it was no problem. When they reached the door, Yoonho looked at Ji-Yun and told her that those who are alive must stay alive, and that he would survive no matter how strange the tasks were. Ji-Yun replied, saying they would survive together. Yoonho looked at her and smiled, wondering if he was beginning to develop feelings for her because of the past two tasks. Then, he opened the door and told her they needed to run to catch up with the others. As they descended the stairs, Ji-Yun hesitantly called out to Yoonho, her voice filled with concern, and asked what they would do if the place was crowded when they arrived. Yoonho replied, saying he hoped that wouldn't be the case, because if the place was indeed full, they would have to fight to secure a spot. But when they entered, the reality was entirely different from what they had anticipated. For the first time, they witnessed someone killing another person. A man holding a stick was hitting anyone who approached the safe zone, refusing to let anyone enter. Yoonho remarked that he had expected something like this to happen, but what he hadn't anticipated was that it would occur while the safe zone was still empty. At that moment, someone shouted from afar, saying that the person in front of them was crazy, that there was enough space inside, and that they did not understand what his problem was. Another person, with the same irritation, said that they could all enter, and asked how he could be so selfish. At that moment, the man exploded, telling them how they could talk about selfishness, when they themselves were always selfish, calling them all despicable people. He continued, still shouting angrily, saying that they always looked down on people with temporary contracts, and that his life had become miserable because of them. He added that if they knew what he had gone through, they wouldn't act this way and give orders in such situations. He asked if he had said something wrong. Afterward, we shift to Yoonho, who said that the person speaking was from the Operations Support Department, and that he was Deputy Director Dong-Suk. Ji-Yeon responded that he had joined 2 years ago to cover for Director On's absence, and that he was supposed to be discharged like them when his contract ended. Upon hearing this, Yoonho thought to himself that this man was in the same situation as he was. He then remembered that he had seen him before, and that despite his large size, this man was always bent over and often shy. People used to say he was very sensitive and irritable, and indeed, there was a reason behind his actions now. A person then appeared and shouted at Dong-Suk, asking him what nonsense he was doing, and how he could talk to him in such a way. This person was Dong-Suk's manager, and he continued, saying how Dong-Suk could be so ungrateful toward the person who had taken care of him. Dong-Suk felt provoked by his words, hit him with the stick in his hand, and said he wasn't a pet for him to claim he took care of him. The onlookers were shocked by what they saw, unable to believe that he had actually killed his manager. Ji-Yeon said it was clear that this was too much, that the manager had been ready to exploit Dong-Suk and then discard him, and that Dong-Suk couldn't control his emotions, leading to him killing his manager. However, Yoonho responded to her, saying he didn't think Dong-Suk had acted out of rage beyond his control. When Yoonho looked at him, he noticed his eye twitching visibly, his breathing deep and rapid, and his hands trembling. It was clear that he wasn't accustomed to this kind of violence. When he looked at the objects around Dong-suk, he found ceramic shards that could be used as a weapon, as well as some potted plants he could throw at anyone. It was evident that he had thought about this plan for a long time. We go back to the moment when Dong-suk's manager shouted at him, throwing his work on the floor and ordering him to rewrite everything from scratch, calling him stupid if he thought he would pay him for that foolish work. He questioned his experience, saying nothing of it was evident, while Dong-suk was holding back with difficulty from reacting to his manager's insults in front of everyone in the office. Back in the present moment, Dong-suk told everyone that they had all seen what happened to the manager, and if anyone tried to enter, they would meet the same fate. People were scared of him, and some quickly left the place to reach another safe area before time ran out. When Ji-yeon noticed what was happening, she asked Yunho what they should do now, as Dong-suk had lost his mind, and they wouldn't be able to reason with him anymore. But Yunho didn't respond to her, and headed toward Dong-suk, thinking to himself that Dong-suk seemed so tense now that it might be the right time to calm him down a bit, and then talk to him. Yunho was anxious because they didn't have much time. When he reached Dong-suk, he told him he wanted to talk to him quickly since they were both on temporary contracts, just like each other. He told him that what he was doing now was like digging his own grave, and Yunho continued calmly, asking him to think rationally. He began explaining that the people from different companies inside the building were certainly cooperating with each other to complete tasks, and it was natural for them to keep looking for allies who could stand by their side. He then spoke directly to Dong-suk, trying to make him understand his current situation, and asked him where he would be among these people if he continued behaving like this. Yunho continued speaking, already affecting Dong-suk's thinking. He said that since Dong-suk had killed his work manager, he would become the person no one wanted on their team. For anyone, having someone like that around was a huge risk, making him unable to be part of any group. Yunho added the final touch, telling him that everyone would see him as the most dangerous person in the place, and that they would need to kill him first to feel safe. He continued, saying that this was how people would perceive him, and in tasks involving competition like this, working alone might be a better option. But if the type of tasks changed in the next stage and became something else, it would be better to start building cooperative relationships now. He then looked at the manager's body on the ground and told Dong-suk that time hadn't run out yet, since he wasn't the only one holding a grudge against the manager. If he stopped this nonsense now, people would be able to understand the situation. He then asked what Dong-suk planned to do now. Would he let them all die and lose every opportunity to form alliances? Yunho was now waiting for Dong-suk's reaction, but Dong-suk completely defied his expectations. He bent down, picked up a vase, and threw it at Yunho. He spoke angrily, shouting at Yunho, asking what he thought he was doing, and how a despicable person like him could think of disrespecting him and talking to him that way. He asked if Yunho thought he was on the same level as someone disabled like him. Yunho seemed to get nervous, and thought to himself that he would have been done for if he hadn't calculated the distance properly. He realized that their time was almost up. At that moment, a properties window appeared in front of him, stating that it was now measuring the necessary data to unlock a skill. Yunho was surprised since this was the first time something like this had appeared to him. He heard Ji-yeon's voice calling him from behind, asking him to watch out for Dong-suk. Yunho, however, couldn't do anything, and was about to be struck by Dong-suk, but someone pulled Yunho back quickly before the stick could hit him. Afterward, this person asked Yunho if he was okay. Yunho replied, surprised since it was the first time he had seen him here in the company, that he was fine, and thanked him for saving him. They then stood aside, and the person introduced himself as Choi, saying that he worked at Hando Company. He then told them that he would leave now to reach a safe area, but Yunho told him that it was too late, and that he wouldn't be able to make it in time. Choi asked him what he meant, and Yunho replied, saying that they might have missed the ideal timing for the rest of the safe areas as well, and that they shouldn't rule out the possibility that the same thing was happening below. Yunho then asked if Choi had served in the military before. Choi was taken aback, unable to believe how Yunho knew without knowing him, but Ji-yeon also noticed because his manner of speaking was very much like that of military personnel. Yunho looked at Ji-yeon and asked if she minded having Choi join their team. Ji-yeon asked if he had any plan in mind that he wanted to execute. Yunho already had an idea, so he told Ji-yeon that the first thing they needed to do was find something to block all of Dong-suk's weapons while entering. Ji-yeon asked him if he knew of anything they could use as a shield. Yunho noticed something that could be used, so he told Ji-yeon and Choi that they were now going to break through the area controlled by Dong-suk and enter the safe zone. We then moved to Dong-suk, where people were shouting at him, telling him that he definitely didn't plan on leaving them outside to die. A girl approached him, scared and crying, begging him to let her in because she didn't want to die this way. But Dong-suk replied to her coldly, asking what service she would provide him in exchange for letting her in, and that she surely wouldn't beg for her life with something trivial. But the sound of something interrupted him, and he looked towards the noise to see what was happening. He saw Choi and Ji-yeon pushing a board toward him, and Yunho told them that they had only one chance, and they had to succeed. At his first signal, they would use the board as a shield to get closer to Dong-suk, and at the second signal, they would flip the board and place it at the entrance. He added that even if the board broke, they shouldn't worry. All they had to do was keep pushing it, and he would cover for them. He then loudly told them that if they understood everything, they should move quickly. The people around were surprised by Yunho's idea, and how they used a board to get closer to Dong-suk. As they got close to him, he started hitting the board, calling them a bunch of crazy bastards. When his stick broke the board, Yunho told them to flip it quickly, causing Dong-suk to lose his stick. Choi was very close to him, so Dong-suk pulled out a scalpel and stabbed Choi with it. When Yunho saw what happened, he ran towards Choi to save him. He kicked Dong-suk to push him away from Choi, but Dong-suk managed to block Yunho's kick, mocking him and asking if he thought a cripple like him could make him back off. But Dong-suk couldn't finish his words as Yunho hit him with the broom he had, responding that he knew his kick couldn't do that. They all managed to get into the safe zone, and Yunho asked Ji-yeon to take Choi and move him out of the way quickly. Ji-yeon said she couldn't just leave him like this, but Yunho told her not to worry, assuring her that he would be fine. Then they heard Dong-suk's voice, saying how a cripple like Yunho could do this to him, looking at him with contempt. Dong-suk then charged at him like an enraged bull, and Yunho said that all animals felt similar emotions. Whether human or beast, when they were consumed by anger, they lost all sense of logic and used their whole body to express their emotions. Most of them charged at their target violently and without any thought, just like a bull charging at a matador. When Dong-suk got close to Yunho and was about to grab him, Yunho moved slightly to the side, causing Dong-suk to leave the safe zone. As soon as he stepped out of the safe zone, time ran out, and all the people around started cursing him, saying that everyone now would die because of him, and that if he hadn't been there, nothing like this would have happened to anyone. Dong-suk started screaming that this was impossible, that it wasn't real, until his body disintegrated and vanished. After that, a notification came saying the mission was successfully completed and that each of them could claim their reward. Yunho said that last time when he used the reward, his leg healed by 70%, and now it should be fully healed. When he used his reward, his leg indeed healed 100%, and he was extremely happy. He finally said that his leg was moving smoothly again, without any discomfort or delay in its reaction. Ji-yeon went to him and asked if his leg had fully healed now. He replied that it was true, and that it had returned to how it was before. Ji-yeon was very happy and congratulated him on the recovery of his leg once again. Yunho told her it was thanks to her help, but she responded quite the opposite, saying she felt like she was a burden to him. Yunho thought to himself that the time for celebration was over, and that he was still just an ordinary human, while others might be getting closer to becoming superhuman by enhancing their bodies and skills, not just regaining what they had lost. Then Yunho and Ji-yeon heard Choi's voice, crying, so Ji-yeon quickly went to him and asked if he was okay. Choi answered that he was very happy to have met them, and that he felt this might be the end for him. Therefore, he wanted them to deliver his last words to his mother when they got out of there. But Yunho told him there was no need to worry about his wound because it wasn't deep, and the bleeding had already stopped. Choi was surprised and asked Yunho to repeat himself. Yunho told him that he could now stand normally. Choi said it was strange, and that the wound still hurt a lot. Yunho thought that Choi seemed like a cowardly person, then asked him if he hadn't used his reward yet. Choi replied that he hadn't used it yet. Yunho told him that if he was still worried about his wound, it would be better for him to enhance his body's healing properties further. He explained that using the reward to heal this minor wound immediately would be a waste, whereas improving his natural ability to heal wounds would be more beneficial. Choi was impressed with Yunho's idea and said that he was a genius for thinking of something like that, and then wanted to call him his big brother. Yunho seemed a bit puzzled by Choi's words and asked him about his age. Choi replied that he was 25 years old. Yunho and Ji-yeon were surprised by his response. Yunho said he was 28 years old, so Choi could call him his big brother, and Ji-yeon added that he was also a year younger than her. Yunho said that he thought Choi was at least in his mid-30s because of his appearance. After that, Choi told them that without them, he wouldn't have been able to do anything and would be dead by now. He then asked Yunho how they were preparing for the next mission. Yunho replied that they needed to wait until they knew what the next mission was, and during that time, he asked them to prepare using the mission rewards. Yunho thought to himself that they were now on the 15th floor, and since they were in the middle of the building, it would be easy for them to move around. More importantly, they needed to gather as much information as possible while they still had time, especially about the true nature of skill unlocking. After a little while, Choi's wound healed, and Ji-yeon told him that the wound had healed very quickly, and that once his healing rate increased, the wound recovered perfectly. Choi replied, also surprised, that the wound area had become completely clean, without any scars, to the point that he no longer even knew where the injury had been. Ji-yeon then asked why Yunho was acting this way. Choi answered that he also didn't know. All Yunho had said was that he wanted to check something quickly, but now he was running around the place continuously without any rest. After a little while of running, Yunho reached an important conclusion, which was that the message he had received wasn't just gathering physical data. Of course, physical data had the greatest effect on acquiring skills, and what he had been doing during that time was running around the office to get used to his recently healed leg. He noticed that the speed of data collection had increased to match his restored leg, with the percentage going from 12% to 87% much faster, and he also realized that psychological factors had a significant impact. He says that when the percentage reaches 100%, he might unlock a new skill and wonders what skill he will get. He says that if this were a game, he would choose an offensive skill to dominate a larger number of enemies. However, since he's in reality now, having a more practical skill would be better. Then they receive a new notification, stating that their last mission will be at exactly 3 o'clock. Ji-yeon's eyes fill with tears of joy, and she asks Choi if he heard the same thing as her. He replies, extremely happy, that he also heard it, and that the system indeed told them that this would be their last mission. But Yunho looks at Ji-yeon and Choi, who were overjoyed, and thinks to himself that it's impossible for this to be true, that the next mission will be the last one. He then opens his properties window and says that the system mentioned there was a next stage, and even if this mission was the last one, it would be impossible for them to offer rewards or skills. Ji-yeon calls out to Yunho, telling him that they need to go to the stairs now and wait for the mission to begin. Choi, with great enthusiasm, says that since this will be the final mission,